Hi everyone, this is Luxthos, and we are here today for yet again another installation and customization WeakAuras video for World of Warcraft. We have a brand new expansion coming up, The War Within, and we got some new design WeakAuras, some new customization, and a bunch of fun stuff to share with you today. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you for using the WeakAuras. Thank you for watching this video. I've been sharing these since Battle for Azeroth for free, for retail, for classic, and it's been an awesome journey, and I don't plan to stop making these and updating them. The support has been incredible. If you want to keep supporting this and in any way, shape, or form, even just liking this video, leaving a comment, subscribing to the YouTube channel, or even joining me on Twitch. I stream every single day on Twitch. I play World of Warcraft and a bunch of other games. This is what I love to do. And if you want to show any form of support, just coming in and saying hi, leaving a follow on the stream, or even subscribing to Twitch or Patreon. It is not required or mandatory, but it is very much appreciated. That being said, let's get right into it. All right, so let's install these brand new WeakAuras. So every time we have a major patch or a brand new expansion, I always like to remind people that one of the best way to get the WeakAuras installed and ready to go is with a fresh, clean install. Yes, you can update them if you have some of the custom settings and you have modified some things, but for a brand new expansion, this is going to be very important to make sure to delete the WeakAuras and also any WeakAuras that you don't use that you've been accumulating over the past few years in the previous expansion. So this is going to be a good time. Simply grab your WeakAuras from the previous expansion and delete children and group, right? Delete it. This is going to be the old WeakAuras. We don't need them anymore. Simply delete them and you're going to be good to go. Once that's done, we're going to head over to luxthos.com and we're going to copy the brand new import code. Once we're here, we're going to scroll down on the page and we are going to click the link to copy the script. We're going to head back into World of Warcraft. We're going to type in the chat /WA, open up the panel again. We're going to import. We're going to paste the code, wait for it to load, and then we're going to click import. We're going to let this go all the way through. There you go. And once it is completed, simply close out the WeakAura add-on and do a /reload. This is going to make sure that everything is properly configured, everything is properly settled in. Make sure that every time you open up the WeakAura panel and modify anything, do a /reload. That's going to make sure that everything is ready and good to go. All right, so one important thing to mention here is that when you import these new WeakAuras, make sure that the naming convention inside the group is intact. So what I mean by this is that if there's any duplicate of previous WeakAuras that you've had that are conflicting with this one, there's going to be a little number 2 or 3 or 4 that is going to show up at the end of the group, and that is going to mess some things up. So each of those groups are bound together in order to create a dynamic interface that moves and reacts to the size and width of every single group. And in order to do this, we need to have access to the name of certain groups. So certain groups are going to be bound to other areas. And if the name of those areas isn't correct, then it is not going to be able to position itself correctly. So this is very important. Make sure that once you import, open the group and make sure that there's no number at the end of any of those groups or any of those layers here. So this is going to be very important. If there is, make sure you delete. Make sure you open up your not loaded resource and make sure you look that you don't have anything that's being duplicated here. Make sure you do a nice big cleanup and then import again, and you're going to be good to go. All right, so let's now talk about the size and positioning of the WeakAuras. So depending on your monitor, your resolution, your render scale, your UI scale, all of those things could affect the size and the positioning of the WeakAuras, and it could look a little bit different than what you're seeing now. So I'm currently using a render scale. So we're going to go check this out real quick. I'm using a render scale of 100%. I'm using a 1440p resolution, and my UI scale is completely disabled right now. So this is how I create the WeakAuras. and I pretty much create them to look good at this resolution and this setup. But if you're using something different, or if you're using maybe any add-on that modify those things, I'm going to show you how to get it to look good. So you're simply going to open up the WeakAura panel, and you're going to select the group for your class, right? You're going to select the main group. You're going to go onto the group tab, and you're going to get access to a setting called group scale. Currently, it is set to 1, so it is at 100% render scale for the WeakAuras. And you can modify this. You can lower it or increase it to change the size of the WeakAuras. So if they're taking up too much space on your screen and you simply want to reduce it, you can do so here. Or if they don't take enough space and you want to increase it, this is a pretty easy way to do it as well. You're going to be able to modify the position of the ores as well, using the X offset and the Y offset. And these are also going to be used for something else. So as you can see, we have borders now on pretty much every icon, resource bar. We pretty much remove the space from between the icon and everything to get a more clean design here, and with little borders to separate everything. And this takes a little bit less space on your screen and looks a little bit better. But the issue with this is when you start playing with different render scale, different UI scale, different resolution, different group scale, sometimes the border can simply disappear, which will mean that, for example, these 2 soul shards seems to be one major bar. So there's a couple workaround here if you're modifying the group scale, or if you have a different resolution and some bars seem maybe tricky a little bit, maybe they're disappearing, maybe they're doubling up. This is going to be one way to fix this. So one way that you can help with these bars is by simply, first of all, changing the group scale until they show up again. That's one of the possible things. So you're gonna hit certain breakpoint that are gonna make these borders or these pixel reappear. So trying to get a UI to be pixel perfect that we call is almost nearly impossible. The way that the game renders these type of graphic is really, really complex, really complicated. There's a lot of math going out and a lot of positioning, and there's always going to be a case where a pixel ends up lining up exactly where it doesn't get rendered, and you'll get an issue, right? So we try to get it as close as we can to perfect, but perfect is pretty much impossible to achieve. So the best way to do it, simply play around with the group scale until you might hit a breakpoint that looks good for your resolution. You can also play around with the X and Y offset. So playing with the X offset is going to change sometimes the positioning of, you can do simply like a -1, and that's going to change the offset of some of the pixel. If that doesn't work, you can try 1. It's going to shift it the other way. This is a possibility to fix some of these issues. You can also do the same thing if you have issue with the other line on horizontal line. You can shift the Y offset over here. Simply add 1 to this and see if that fixes your issue. You're going to be able also to increase the border size in the custom option if there's ever anything that happens, but we're going to get back to that a little bit later on. One thing to make sure here, while we talk about positioning and resizing, is that these WeakAuras were made to be an entire class HUD. So they're made to function together. They're dynamic, they're linked, and they're made to be responsive and listening to the positioning of one another. For this reason, you cannot modify the positioning of individual groups or any of the element that you see here. Later on, I'm going to show you how to position different abilities in different orders. You're even going to be able to change the order of any of the resources, any of the spell, but the groups, it is very important. Do not touch the positioning of any of those groups, as they are dynamic and responsive based on the positioning of each other. This allows us to have a very nice looking design that will be responsive to any of the talent that you pick, any of the hero talent that you choose. It's going to be responsive in width, in height, and everything is going to work really, really well together. But for that to happen, you cannot modify the positioning. Don't try to break and split everything off. It's going to create more problem than it's going to be solving here. You're going to be able to have access to different positioning tool when we head over to the custom option. You're going to be able to create spacing, have elements be further apart than each other, and there's going to be a bunch of things you're going to be doing, but do not modify the positioning. Don't try to click and drag any of these. You're most likely going to break something. Just try to leave them whole and don't move them out of the group either, or try to use them with, like try to extract certain thing. So I know some people sometimes like to grab the resources and use them elsewhere. With this pack, this is not going to work. So everything is meant to be together. And if you want the WeakAuras to behave normally, you're going to have to keep them together as a whole unit pack. All right, so before we get into the fun stuff and customize and style the WeakAuras, I want to do a quick overview of the different groups, the different layers, and pretty much what is the purpose of everything here. So you have your class wrapper, which is going to contain the name of your class, and within it are going to be all the groups and all the different ores that are needed for everything to function. The first two here are going to be the class options and the general options. If you click any of these and go to the custom option tab over here, you're going to see that there's going to be a bunch of little drop downs that contain information like color gradient, the height, the gradient direction, and all that stuff. So that allows you to customize the style of your ores and just make it look different based on what you prefer. The general options here is going to contain global styling for the entire aura, right? So this is going to be things that could technically be applied to other classes. They're going to be global, they're going to be generic, and you're going to be able to transfer them as well. So this is going to modify the width, the height of the icon, the number of icons that are showing on a single line, the positioning of pretty much everything here, the alpha setting if you want your WeakAuras to be transparent out of combat while you're dragon riding or sky riding now. This is all going to be here. If you want to add a border, remove the border, change the color of the border, all of this is going to be done through here. And the beauty of this is that if you create a style that you like, you make some modification to this, you can simply right-click, copy settings, custom configuration here, and then we can head over to Death Knight, for example, general option, and paste the custom option. So by doing this, you're going to transfer your brand new style that you created to a different class. You can do this for all classes available. This is why class and general option are split up, because you don't want to copy, obviously, class option onto a different class, right? You just want to copy the general option. So the reason we're doing this is simply because it's going to be a lot easier for you to update your WeakAuras. Because you might be wondering, why is the gradient being changed here, the gradient direction, the resource height, even the border, while all of this is technically available in the auras on the display tab itself. So normally if you want to add a border, you do it through here. If you want to change the width of an icon, you do it through here in the display tab. Same thing here for the resources. You're going to click those, and then you're going to have access to the border, the color, the gradient, and all of this. The problem is that this display tab also contains a lot of important information, like stack, for example, or any text that's displayed over the icon. Sometimes there's going to be complex things that are going to be needed from a lot of these elements in order to display some cool information. And sometimes we need to modify those things depending on what is being updated in a new patch, right? So sometimes Blizzard might change the way a class functions or something like this, and this needs to be updated. So the problem is, if this is updated, then you also lose all of your other setting. You lose your border, you lose your gradient color, you lose everything else that you've worked really, really hard to customize to your liking. So by moving all of those options into the custom tab here, into the custom option tab, they can be saved every time you update. So I'm going to make a different video, a separate video that's going to explain exactly how to update existing WeakAuras. So in this case right here, what we're doing is we're doing a fresh, clean install for brand new expansion. But then for the rest of the expansion, every time that there is a brand new update, a brand new patch, you can simply update them, and you're going to be able to save these settings. These settings are going to be able to be kept. So the custom configuration, right? So what I modify are the author option. What you modify is the custom configuration. And these can be saved and passed across whenever you update your auras. So by doing this, if you modify your border here and your gradient in this zone right here, then everything is kept while you update. So this is going to be very, very nice. Outside of these custom options, so these are these can be accessed by clicking on them and clicking the custom option, or clicking the global group, then custom option, and they're all going to be joined together. As you can see, this is now showing you all the class-specific settings, but also all the global one. Then we have the dynamic effects. So this is going to be a group that contains all the procs that are necessary to play your class. So if you have anything that will proc like backlash or, sudden death, execute, all of this stuff for many different classes, all of that is going to show up in this group. So this is going to be things that are showing temporarily. Nothing here is going to be in a permanent format, except some exception for certain class that have specific design, especially like healers that need to keep track of a lot of damaging ability. This can be used for this. But for general purposes, dynamic effects is going to be things that are temporary, usually effects that you apply, or maybe procs, or any kind of effects like this is going to be in this group. We've made some changes to the design. So the dynamic effects is no longer on the left, on the right side here, while the overflow here was on the left side. So if you remember in the previous expansion, this was a little bit different. So now this setting here is going to be a little bit different. So if we have any dynamic effects showing up, they're going to be showing up directly in the middle. This cannot be changed. So this is a new design option that I'm going with. The reason I'm going with this is simply that I needed more space. Blizzard is constantly adding new effects, new spell, and having to split this on the left side here and the right side here at 50% capacity created a lot of issues. Pyramid icons would stack and it created a lot of problem. And I needed a way to create myself more space, more design options. And just in general, this is just going to be like a better design. If you think that things are hiding your feet a little bit too much, make sure you simply move the ores a little bit lower and you're not going to run into any issues. So this is the new design for the dynamics effect, and this is what the group is used for. Right underneath it is going to be the core. So the core is going to be all of your main spell, all of your rotational spell are going to be in here, your cooldown, rotational, and sometimes even some procs. If they're so important for your class, like for example, Nightfall, which is going to be proccing all the time for Warlock, it is something that you need to watch for very, very carefully. I've decided to add it into the core because it's something that you want to keep track of very easily. Okay. So some of these might show up in here, and sometimes I might change them based on feedback, based on suggestion from players. These might end up showing up in the core. So in general, it's going to be everything that's rotational is going to be in here, and there's going to be an overflow. What I mean by overflow is that currently the maximum number of icons showing in the core is 8. You can increase this if you want to 10, which means that every 10 icon that's currently available for my talents right now is going to be displayed here. Obviously, if you remove a talent, if you remove Dark Glare, for example, it's going to simply disappear and everything is going to adapt, right? The spacing is going to become a little bit smaller here. Everything is going to follow exactly the width of the ores here. It's going to take only what's needed. So, but the issue here is if you have less, then less is not going to be an issue. But if you have more spells than the minimum number of icon here, it's going to create an overflow. So this is not really an issue. This is actually a design choice. This allows you to have dynamic layout here. So when we go back to Dark Glare, it's going to show up right here. You're going to be able to style this overflow. We're going to go into a little bit more detail later on. There's an entire panel here for the core and for the overflow here. So you're going to be able to change their width if you want them to be above or below. All these options, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. But this is the core, rotational ability. Everything here is good to go. The left and right side, these have been around for quite a while. I don't use them personally, but I know a lot of people that do love to put abilities in there. So this is going to be really straightforward. If you would like to move one of your abilities, let's say we go here and we take Summon Dark Glare, for example, and we put it over to the left group, it's going to show up right here. So currently it is underneath my player panel, but you can see that it's showing up on the side. It has its own style settings. It has its own size settings. You can change and modify and customize all of this, but this allows you to move ability into these groups. So if you want to put, for example, interrupts, purge, taunt, CC, all of those things can be put into those side groups, allowing you to locate them a little bit more easily. So that's going to be it for the core group here. We're going to get, so the left side and the right side group, we're going to get into the utilities. So utilities is going to be your different utility spell, right? That kind of makes sense. So you have crowd control, you have anything that's going to be not necessarily a rotational ability, sprint, movement abilities, some PvP talents are going to be in here, your demonic gate, all of that stuff. Everything that's pretty much used, your defensives are going to be here. All of that is going to be in the utility section. And it's a little bit different than what we had in Dragonflight. So in Dragonflight, none of the utilities were showing up by default. This is still something that you can achieve with a custom setting, but I did decide to change a little bit the style of how this was going to show up. So one of the issue that we had in previous expansion is that in the previous expansion in Dragonflight is that whenever abilities went on cooldown, it was a little bit difficult to figure out which ability ended up being on cooldown in the end, right? So if you had all of your abilities on cooldown here, you had little gray icon at the bottom, and it was kind of difficult. So let me show you what the previous design would look like. If I go to utilities here and I go to show on cooldown, this is how it used to be. It would simply show up like this, and it made it a little bit complicated to see what is actually going on, right? Because you didn't know, like, okay, is this really the right ability? Am I looking at the correct one? By having them always show like this, first of all, when they become active, their opacity goes to 100%. When they go on cooldown, their opacity goes to 100%. And they have now a fixed location, which means that you know that your third ability is your Shadow Fury. You know that it's this one. So you know that just by looking at this here, even though the icon is desaturated and it's a little bit smaller, you end up learning the positioning of every single one of them, and you can see them and locate them a little bit better. You can see that they have a 30% opacity setting here. So you can change this. So if you want, you can use 100, press enter. There's going to be a little bit of delay here because it needs to modify the setting for all of the utilities. So I don't recommend that you use the slider because it can cause a little bit of lag, right? Because it's trying to modify a lot of information very, very quickly. So simply type in the value 30 or, for example, 100 if you want them to be at full opacity at all time. So by doing this, you can see that all of them now are at full opacity. There's some exception for things that, I've designed it in a separate way. So this one, for example, is going to be lower opacity because it's not down. It's not currently active, and I want to show and communicate that to you. So, but everything else is going to be at full opacity, and you're going to be good to go. So we're going to leave it back to default, which is going to be 30 here. And then we're going to be good to go for the utilities here. Maintenance. So the maintenance icon are simply things like your buff, right? So Warlock doesn't have any buff, but you have a bunch of stuff that still needs to be kind of, maintained. So make sure you have your demon available. Make sure you have your Grimoire of Sacrifice active if you did spec into that talent, if you're missing a soul stone while you're in a raid group, and even some occasional cooldowns that aren't really utilities, right? So like you're not going to be casting Ritual of Summoning mid-combat. So for this reason, this goes into a separate group that's a little bit lower down on your screen. And then if you go in combat, for example, you'll see that these will show up. So maintenance icon do not show up in rested area, just because I didn't want icon to kind of annoy you while you're just sitting in town. You're just using the auction house or talking to a friend, crafting something. You don't need to be reminded constantly that you didn't use Arcane Intellect or that you don't have your pet out, right? It doesn't matter. So as soon as you go in combat, it's going to show up. As soon as you're not in a rested area, which means that you're probably in the world and you're probably about to engage some enemies, it's going to show you and let you know that you're missing something, right? So that's going to be very easy to do. And you can also change the behavior of some of the maintenance icons. So if you go to the custom option here, maintenance icon, you're going to see that we have change in behavior for the soulstone, for your pet, for your grimoire. Again, if you click on the main group, open here, everything in here, the utility and the maintenance, everything is in here, but you can also click them directly if you want to just see these. You can modify these and put them into other groups, right? So the utilities as well. If you want Mortal Coil to be in the left side, you can simply click it. You can make its alpha be 100% if you want it to behave like any of the other icons, and then move it right into the group. Simple as that. So you can do that also with maintenance pretty easily. We're now going to get to the resources here. So this is going to be pretty simple. You're going to get your health bar, your soul stone, and any other information that you need for your class. Sometimes it's going to be cooldown trackers, energy, combo points. All of that is going to be here. The order in which they're listed in the group is actually the order that they're going to appear in. So if you want your cast bar to be at the top, Simply select the cast bar, move it, and voila. So now your casting bar is at the top of the resources. Simple as that. So this creates a gap here, obviously, because, the casting bar is here, but we can do some interesting stuff with that later. I'm going to show you when we modify the order of all of the element. It's going to be pretty cool. So we're going to move that back down here, but you can do this for everything. The health bar by default is set to optional. So every single health bar for every class is set to optional because I do not use it personally. I think less people tend to use these in their WeakAuras. It seems to be something a little bit more niche, so I let people the choice. If you would like to see it, simply go to the load tab and uncheck never, and you'll have your health bar for your class. Talking about optional stuff, a lot of auras can be set to optional. So one of the things that I did going from the previous expansion into this one is that we added a lot of optional things. So things that don't necessarily need to be tracked at all time. They're not really relevant in your rotation. They are simply kind of neat to see maybe. They might have some utilities, but you're not going to play differently knowing that the buff or the debuff is active. So a lot of these are going to be set to optional, and they're going to be marked as optional. If you see that anything as the word optional in its name, simply go to the load section and uncheck never if you do want to see it. So if you're looking for anything and you're wondering why you're not seeing it, so for example, in this case, Dark Harvest, you're wondering why it's not showing up, you can search it into the bar here, click it, unload it, or actually load it, and then you're going to be good to go here. So that's going to be it for the group overview. This is going to give you a good idea of where every element is and why it's there and what's its purpose. All right, so let's get now into the fun part, customizing and styling your brand new WeakAuras. If you've been using these in the past for Dragonflight, there's a high chance that you know what these are, but you also might not. And if you're new to using the pack, I want to show you what this is all about. I've been pretty much hinting and teasing this tab for the entirety of this video, and now we're going to go in depth and explain every single setting that you can find here. So if you click on your class group and then you go to the custom option tab here, you're going to see a bunch of drop down that are going to allow you to style, customize, and do a bunch of cool stuff with the auras. This is going to change the behavior of default WeakAuras. So what this means is that, like I've explained a little bit before, things that would normally be changed in the display tab are now going to be controlled through here. This is going to allow you to update your WeakAuras more easily. It's going to allow you to keep your customization settings when you update the WeakAuras on a new patch. So if there's a new patch that comes up, I need to modify some things, you're going to need to update the whole class package, but you're going to be able to opt out of updating the custom option, which will leave you with all of these custom options intact, which is really, really good. We're going to go through them real quick, explain them, and show you what you can do with these things. So first of all, the global style is going to be for the border. You're going to get the border style, the icon zoom. So simple enough. If you want like a thick border on your icons, you can do that. By default, it is set to 1. And then you're going to have the border color. You can change this. If you want like pink border, you can do that. The border offset, try to have it match if you can. So if you increase this to 2, try to increase this to 2 as well. If you don't know what this is for, simply don't touch it. You don't need to modify it. You can decide to apply not to the resources if you want, or not to the icons. You can change all of this. Icon zoom is going to be just the zoom that's being applied to each individual icon in the pack. So it's just going to remove maybe a little bit of the border. So if you're using maybe like a custom icon pack that have really, really cool like shadow border, simply remove the zoom in order to get back to this original World of Warcraft, like border style, if you're using those or anything like this, right? So this is going to be all about the icon and the global style of the pack. The alpha setting allows you to change the opacity of the pack. So if you want to have your ores be lower opacity at all time, you can do this. That's a possibility. There we go. If you want it to only happen out of combat, that is also possible. So if you want your auras, for example, to be at 0 opacity outside of combat, there you go. And as soon as you target something, the WeakAuras are going to show up. The really, really cool thing is that the casting bar is not affected by this, so you still get to see your casting bar. So that's pretty neat. So you have ignore on friendly target and ignore on enemy. If those are unchecked, then it's not going to show up until you get into actual combat, even if you target the enemy. So that's pretty cool. Feel free to use this. This is a replacement for having to use the never load setting. So if you want a weak aura pack to not show in combat, do not use this right here, because some of the code in here needs to be always on in order to dynamically style the ores. So checking the option into the load tab here could break stuff. So I don't recommend that you check any of the load setting here while targeting the main group. Simply use the custom option and change the auto combat alpha. It's going to be way easier this way. The mounted alpha, pretty self-explanatory. If you're on a mount, what do you want the ores to do? You can have this for skywriting, for example, so that you can put your skywriting HUD or UI right in the middle. So if you want, you can do this. Every time that you decide to dragon ride, it's simply going to make the weak aura disappear. So very straightforward. Every time you use this, there we go. So they all disappear, and then you can put your UI, your little counter here on the middle of your screen. So that's a possibility. That's going to be done. That used to be by default, but we did change this because there was a lot of issue of people importing the ores while on their mount and then wondering where the ores were once they would exit the panel, right? So we simply disable this by default, but it is still accessible right here. And then you got a bunch of dynamic stuff here, a bunch of icons, spacing. All of this is going to be to change the style. So very straightforward. If you would like to style the dynamics, the core, the left side, the utility, all of this is being done through here. So you have the width and height of each icon. So as you can see, none of the icon have a square ratio. So they always have a little bit less height than width. It allows us to create a more smaller footprint on your screen while keeping the same information. If you don't like this, simply bring those back to 38 and 48 respectively here, and then they're going to become square, full square again, and you're going to be good to go. So as you can see, it did not modify the overflow. The overflow is a different one here. There we go. And then the overflow is going to be full square as well. As you can see, those are slightly smaller than the main icon. So if you want, you can have these be the same width, right? You can have them be exactly the same width and even reduce the size here until you get a perfect double row bar right here. So that's really, really cool. So you have full icons, perfectly aligned, double row. That wasn't possible previously, but now it is, which is really, really neat. And you can even interchange the position of these. So if you want the overflow to be below your main core, it's actually going to flip it. So it doesn't look like it did anything, but these used to be on top. So all of the longer cooldown are now at the bottom, and the shorter abilities and the more rotational one are usually at the start. Now they're on top. So that's one of the possibility here. At any point, you can hit restore to default, and everything will go back the way that it was when you install the WeakAuras. So it might take a little bit to make sure to reset everything, but once you hit that button, you're going to be good to go. All right. So one of the cool things that we can do here is also, for example, increase the spacing between the icon. That's a possibility. Just play around with these and see what you like, what you want to create here. So while I was talking about the overflow, we can change the overflow to have this show up at the bottom right here. But as you can see, this looks a little bit strange because the resources are below the core. So if we put them above the core, we'll get this look right here, right? As you can see, there's a gap that was showing up. That is the casting bar. We can move this to the top right here. And now the casting bar is at the top. And now we have completely flipped the design. We have the resources at the top, and we have the core and overflow at the bottom here. If you don't want your utilities to show up at all time as well, I've shown you how to do this already. You can go to the utilities and do show on cooldown, for example. And then you get like this kind of clean reverse look, which is really, really nice. If you want to go even and style their soul shard bar or any of these, you can go for a 5 pixel, for example. So you get this nice little look over here. So because we're moving these to the top, we're going to need to change a little bit their strata status here. So you can go ahead and take the soul shard, for example, modify this to be something like low or medium, and the number should show up over the icon here. So that's going to be really, really neat. And then you can even go and change the size of the text here if you want. So this is going to be like different for every class, but I'm still going to show you real quick, right? So you can like increase the text size here, and then you can get like this really, really cool look. I really, really like this. You can even like, if you want to reduce the footprint even further, can go to the core reduce the height of the icon here. There you go. Reduce this even further. Reduce this even further. And you have like this cool little look that's just very, very small, very low footprint. And that took me what? Maybe a minute, 60 seconds. And we got a completely different new set of WeakAuras. So that's really, really sweet. That's really, really sweet. That's one of the cool things that you can do with this. And now we're just going to proceed and reset everything. So I'm going to move this back down here. We're going to make sure that these are back to inherited. And we're going to reset the options here. All right, so if we keep going here, you'll see that you have as well utilities, which you can change the behavior like we talked about, the maintenance like we talked about earlier into the video. You can change the behavior on when those show up. And then you have access to the resources for your class, the color of the gradient if you want your health bar to be, I don't know, class color, maybe like a purple, the purple. For Warlock, you can do that. You can change the height of the bar. If you want your health bar to be this massive, thick bar right here, you can do that. If you would like to change as well your casting bar, your mana, all of that good stuff, you can change all of this. You're going to be able to modify all of it. And all of it is going to be saved. So this is really, really cool. So all of this is going to be saved when you update because you're going to be able to keep the information. While we're getting here onto the cast bar, I just want to mention the cast bar right now replaces your current default casting bar. So if you want, you can simply go here and do never if you don't want to use this casting bar, and then you can do a reload, and that's going to bring you back your default casting bar. Whether you're using the default UI one or maybe an LVUI bar, this is just going to bring it back by doing this simple step, right? So the casting bar is now showing back up at the bottom, and it is gone from the WeakAuras, right? You can see that there's a little bit of a gap in here. This is because that's being created by some top margin from the utilities. So I could set this to 0, for example, and then everything would be super nice and holding together, right? There we go. Every time you open the WeakAura panel, it will reset the code, especially if you're targeting the casting bar. So that's why my casting bar didn't show up here. We're going to go and click this, and we're going to make sure we load it again because I do want it. Another possibility here that you could do is I will be sharing an external casting bar. So if you want to move this casting bar outside of the group, it's a little bit complicated because right now it's listening for some calls to change the gradient and the color and all that stuff. But let's say that you would like to have this elsewhere on your screen. A lot of people do. I will be sharing an external casting bar that you will be able to import the same way you imported this and simply move it anywhere you want on your screen. So if you want it, it could be like all the way at the bottom here, and then you could remove the one that's provided with the pack. So you're going to be able to do this and then do never, for example, and you're going to be good to go. So I'm going to be sharing this in the description of this video, and it's going to be as well on my website. And you're going to be able to move this bar anywhere you want on your screen. You are no longer going to be able to customize its gradient through the custom option, but you're going to be able to go through the display, change the gradient, change the border, change everything you want. It's all in here, all in the display tab. That's all that you pretty much need to look at. So I'm going to be sharing this bar separately. If you would like to modify the positioning of this bar, this one needs to remain here. That's why it's a little bit more complicated because we're doing dynamic resizing. This external one is not going to dynamically resize. So it's not going to stay the same width as the pack because it's no longer with the pack, right? So that's why we have to separate it, and that's why you're going to have to import a separate one if you want to move it out and freely on the screen. So that's going to be it for the styling of your ores. Like I explained a little bit earlier as well in the video, if you made a lot of modifications to the style of your ores and you really, really like it, you can duplicate the general option style onto another class. So once you're done, you've applied your border, you did everything, right-click, copy, custom configuration, and then you paste that onto the next class, and you are good to go. So now your Death Knight or your other favorite class is going to look exactly like your main class WeakAuras, except the class setting, right? So if you made some modifications to your Soul Shard, obviously that's not going to do anything on your Rogue, so you're not going to copy the class option, just the general one. One thing that I want to go over is the load tab setting. So this is something that usually creates a lot of confusion, a lot of mistake, a lot of breaking things and bugs happen here. And I want to go over the option, what can be modified, what shouldn't be touched, and pretty much all of the do's and don'ts of the load tab here. So for a general rule, if you're clicking the entire group here, I would not advise to click any or change any of the load setting option while clicking a group. The way that this works is that every single aura has a different load setting. Conflict rate is meant to load for destruction with a certain spell known, while Soul Strike is meant to load for demonology, for example. So what happens is if you click the entire group and then you click on anything here for the class specialization, you're pretty much going to request every single aura within the group to load for that specialization, which is going to cause duplicates and a lot of issues. This often happens with hybrid class, for example, Holy, Protection, and Retribution Paladin. People do not want the WeakAuras for Holy. They only want it for Protection and Retribution, and then they click here, and then everything breaks. So never click these options here. The only one that I advise that you can use is the spec roll. So as you can see, it's white here, which means it's not being used by any of the ores. And if you click this, you're going to be able to change which role. If you click it a second time, you can check here that you would like the ores to load for damage dealer and tank, but not for healer, right? By leaving it unchecked. This is not going to create any issue, and this is going to be working perfectly fine. Sadly, if you don't want to use the WeakAuras for maybe one of the spec that you're playing that is a damage dealer. For example, let's say you're playing Warlock and you don't want to use my ores for demonology, but for affliction and destruction, that doesn't really work. There's no way around this. So this is a full class HUD. It is available for every spec, and there's no way for me right now to split up between different spec. The best that you can do is going to be here by selecting the role. So if you don't want to see healer or tank, WeakAuras, or even damage WeakAuras, then you can simply change these and everything should work out and nothing should break. So avoid changing the class specialization, avoid changing especially the in-combat loading for the entire group. This is going to break pretty much everything. The code is not going to be loaded in time, and then the positioning of the aura is going to be all over the place. You can modify, however, the load setting for individual things. So if any of these abilities, you don't want to see it, feel free to click it and then load never. There's no problem with that. No issue whatsoever. So that can be done. I just wanted to go over this really, really quickly. Pretty much in general rules, don't click the group here in the load setting. Don't change anything in here because you're most likely going to break anything unless you're playing with the spec roll here. All right, so that's pretty much it for this video. Hope you were able to install and configure the WeakAuras to your liking. If you ever have any issues with the WeakAuras, if you want to report a bug, or if you need help with something that might not be working as intended, make sure to join our Discord, discord.gg/Luxthos. The link is going to be in the description of this video. We have a support section. We have a ticket system that you can create ticket to report bugs and all that stuff. So make sure you go there, post your information, post your question, and I'll do the best in my ability to try to help you out. Also, I am streaming on Twitch pretty much every single day. I'm playing World of Warcraft, but also a lot of different games. If you want to say hi or have any question, feel free to join in. Even if I'm not playing World of Warcraft or doing WeakAuras at the time, feel free to ask your question. Feel free to just say hello if you want to. That would actually mean a lot to me. Hopefully, you have a beautiful and amazing time in the War Within. Let me know which class you are going to be playing down in the comment section. Have you made up your mind? And if you have any question, make sure to use that comment section as well. Like, subscribe. That's it. I'm done. See you guys in War Within.